Hello everybody, it's Whiskey11 and welcome back to the Gaming Lounge. And in this video we are going to talk about DCS World, F-14 Tomcat, Lantern Pod. And for those who don't know, the Lantern Pod is the laser targeting pod for the F-14 Tomcat. This allows it to use laser-guided bombs in the absence of a JTAC lasing for the target, or another aircraft lasing for the target. Now, the Tomcat has a couple of unique issues with regards to its laser-guided bombs. The biggest one being that it can only carry up to 4 of them. Granted, it can carry the GBU-24, which is a 2,300-pound monstrosity Paveway 3. However, it currently doesn't work in-game as of the making of this specific video, so... well, that's kind of nice. The biggest problem is that unlike in the F-18 or the Harrier or the A-10, the codes for these laser-guided bombs cannot be changed in flight. They have to be set on the ground. And in order to do that, you have to actually open up the kneeboard. And let me see here if I can get the kneeboard to pop up. You can see here the laser code on this aircraft is set to 1688. Now, it says that we can change it, but of course they got the big red letters down at the bottom. It says only near ground crew, which is absolutely true. We cannot change any of these aspects in flight, which means we need to remember that number, or just pull up the kneeboard, or just leave it as the default. Or if you're playing on Through the Inferno, it's always 1686. But there's a couple of different things that you can do. Now, to talk about the Lantern Pod itself, this all has to be done from the Rio seat, which is the back seat, which means that we need to get into the back seat in order to use it. That is a slight issue if you are in multiplayer and have to use Jester AI, because you cannot actually switch to the back seat. So that is, of course, an added problem. You have to have a Rio in multiplayer. In single player, we can switch back and forth between the front and rear seat, and it works out pretty well. So go ahead and unpause this again, and get rid of our kneeboard. Maybe. There we go. So to set this up, I've just created a little bit of a mission here that I'm going to set us up on a nice little attack run here for this island ahead of us, which is where I have the... enemy vehicles are currently set, so I'm going to go ahead and get us moving along here at a pretty good clip. We need to be in air-to-ground mode on the pilot, and we need to switch this over to the TCS mode on this first top display. Once we've done that, that pretty much ends our roll up here until it comes time to drop the bombs. Everything else is done in the Rio seat, so we'll hit the 2 button, and then we'll jump back here in the Rio seat. Now, because this is DCS World and the cockpits are unusually dark, we'll turn on our lights. To know if you have the Lantern Pod installed, you have to actually install it in the rearming panel, and we'll go ahead and pause it again. The rearming, when you put it on there, can only be put on the right glove station, so it replaces one of your Sparrows or Phoenix missiles on this outer station. You can see it there. When you first get into the aircraft and you first get everything started up and you first get airborne, I highly recommend you start powering this thing on. I'm not going to cover the various different aspects and all the controls that need to get set up on this. Red Kite has a fantastic tutorial on what key bindings you're going to need. There's just a couple of things I want to talk about with regards to how to use it, especially with regards to single player. But it takes about 8 minutes. Yeah, you heard that number right. 8 minutes to get started up. That is a long time to wait. So definitely get it up and running as soon as you possibly can. That way you don't have to wait for it to work when it comes time to actually use it. So when you have your Lantern Pod installed, you will see this joystick over here on the left-hand side. It looks suspiciously like a left-handed FA-18 Hornet joystick, yeah, we'll call it a joystick, control stick, and there's probably a good reason for that. It pretty much operates exactly the same way, except for one key difference. It does not move. So unlike the hand control unit, which, you can push forwards, back, left, and right to move things around, this does not. It only is there for the buttons. So We'll unpause this again. In order for us to get to the actual lantern display back here, we need to hit this button back here, which is the video mode. You can see right now it's in TCS, and if we switch our camera setup here to the TV mode, it will bring up the TCS. If we switch over to Lantern, or to the FLIR, you can see it says FLIR there in the pod. Ta-da! We have our Lantern pod. So there are a couple of things, we'll pause it once again, that we want to cover for this portion of the video. There are a couple of things on the HUD that, well, we'll call it a HUD. It's not a HUD, but on the screen that are important. Obviously, you have your crosshairs. Those are obviously important. We have this white line here, which is the gimbal limits of the Lantern pod. And we have this square up here above the 360. That is where our pod is at in relation to its gimbal limits. Once again, that being the lines out here. If you are trying to laze a target and this square is out of that white line, you will see this down here turn to LM, and sometimes the video will actually turn all black. You will just see the green lettering on the screen, but you will have no video at all. Now, right now, we don't have any video, and that's because the lantern pod is actually pointed up at the sky, but we'll fix that here in a minute. Up here in the upper left-hand corner, you can see we've got our latitude, longitude. I believe this is where the lantern pod is currently aimed at. See the altitude, that's the aircraft altitude. This might actually be aircraft. Red Kite goes into much greater detail on this. These other things don't really care too much about. You can see here we are in white hot mode. This is in a very important mode to be in. We are in automatic gain control, which is important. Here is the range of the laser. Azimuth, the elevation of the laser, that kind of stuff is not important. The L here indicates that if it's a solid L, it is not flashing. That means that the laser is armed, but not currently active. Down here we have our laser code, and in front of it is an M or an A. We want, depending on the situation, you really want to use the auto lasing for your own laser-guided bombs. You want to use manual lasing when you are lasing for other people, or you just need to have the laser latch button bound in the key bindings so that you can manually activate the laser even in auto mode. And what auto mode does is it basically automatically activates the laser 10 seconds before impact, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So let's unpause this once again, and I'm going to go ahead and take control of this. Now for me, if you are a Thrustmaster A10 Warthog HOTAS owner, you can actually set up your HOTAS to use this without having to set up different key bindings different from the hand control unit. So if I were to look back down, you can see hand control unit still used there. But what I've done is I've added a modifier in front of all of that so that I can actually slew the TDC. So now you can see we have visual targets. There is one other thing that I want to point out with this display. That's this AA down here. That means that we are in aircraft mode, the anti-aircraft mode. And within this mode, we actually cannot laze ground targets. So we need to switch that. Again, that's a key binding. To air to ground, this allows us to switch to area or point tracking, which just stabilizes the camera significantly better. We also have the ability to zoom in 3 different zoom levels, and as you can see, it's freaking awful at max zoom at these long distances. I'm going to guess that this up here is actually the aircraft's position because it's constantly changing. So as we get closer and closer to this target, there's a couple things that we need to set up. Obviously, since we are in bombcat mode, we need to actually set up our stores management page. We need to take the weapon type and we need to change it to our bomb load, which is GBU 16s. You can use this head up. This here changes the mode on the pilot's HUD. I just leave it in PLT. It does display a lot of extra detail on their display that they don't really need. So you can leave it there, but manual is technically the method you're supposed to use. Obviously, you want to make sure that you have it set to the correct fusing. In this case, nose fusing. You can use nose and tail, by the way. That works. As well as select the station. So we're gonna use all 4 stations are going to be available, but it will only drop 1 bomb at a time. Okay, so now that we've got this panel set up, we will see that over here we have GBU 16 selected. And now it's just a matter of finding targets and lasing them. So let me pause my display here so that it stops moving around. Thanks, Track IR. And let's see if we can't find something to actually attack. Now, here we go, all the way up here at the end. We can't quite see them, but I know they're going to be about here. And what I've done is I've taken the trigger on my A10 HOTAS, and so long as I have my modifier held down, it will fire the locking portion of the lantern pod. It will also, you saw it at half press, also shot the laser temporarily, but that's pretty unimportant. It was the full press of the trigger that got us this new information. So at the top of this, you see this horizontal bar. We've got a caret, and then we've got a line, and then we have a number here. This is the number of degrees that the pilot needs to steer so that they fly directly over this point. You can see we're within 1 degree. In my experience, the GBUs, the 16s for sure, between 2-ish degrees, sometimes 3, depending on how stable the aircraft is, off of this line can actually still get successful hits. Ideally, you want this to be as close to center as possible. So this is going to be your horizontal positioning and what direction, course-wise, you need to take. So in this case, we would need to go left 1 degree in order to overfly this one point. On the right-hand side, you can see we now have a bomb release time indicator. Whew. It's a mouthful. And you can see down here we actually have a countdown timer that says we have 85 seconds to time to release. This is not like the Hornet's auto bombing mode in which you designate a waypoint and then you can press and hold the pickle button, and once it reaches 0, it will actually then go and drop the bomb. In this case, if you press the pickle button here at time to release 85, it will drop it 85 seconds too early. Yes, you are in a very analog aircraft, and so there is nothing fancy like that on board the Tomcat. So you can see we have 85 seconds to get everything lined up. You also can see here we have a time to go marker. This is if we were to release our bomb, how long everything would take. You can also see this for sure is the GPS coordinates of that point on the runway. Where our target is designated is where this number comes from. So we are still in manual mode, so let's unpause this again. You can see the screen is kind of stabilized a little bit, but anyway, we'll go ahead and switch this over to manual. We want to keep our number at 1688, so we will not change that. We're getting a little bit closer here. Let's see if we can't get a contrast lock. Nope. So you can see there's a lot of contrast here, but the contrast lock does not work in black hot for some odd reason. So we gotta get a little bit closer to these guys. You can also see now that our steering indicator now says 2, so that's an added problem. We're getting a little bit close here. There we go. Finally got ourselves a contrast lock. So once we've got it locked up, what we're going to do is we're going to switch back to the pilot seat, because now we need to actually be paying attention to what our pilot is doing. So now we want to come left a little bit. You got to hold it because we're in autopilot mode. Come on. There we go. Okay, so now the bomb fall release indicator is starting to come down. We want to make sure that when that hits 0, that we pickle a bomb. Got to make sure that master arm is on. Okay, in 4, 2, 1. Okay, now it changed, so we're going to switch back to the Rio seat, and this is important. Oftentimes what I have found is once you pickle the bomb, sometimes the lantern pod will actually lose its lock, the contrast lock. It just depends on your altitude relative to the target that you're dropping the bomb on. But you can see here we've got time to impact is 25 seconds. This time to go is actually time to overfly the waypoint. My apologies. So 19 seconds time to impact. And so long as this lock continues, the time to impact marker, you'll start to see this L flash here pretty soon. Okay, so now it's flashing. The laser is armed. That means the bomb should start tracking that laser now. And in 3, 2, 1, 0, boom! One of the hard parts about using the lantern pod is that it will instantly switch into Sorry, it will instantly switch into an unstabilized mode, and it will no longer track things once you have destroyed the target and kind of oversaturated the screen there. That is something that you got to get used to. If you're Johnny on the spot with it, when you get your time to impact down to 0, you'll be ready there with the control to set it to area mode or point lock, depending on whether or not you have another target that you can laze. Because we're overflying these targets, you can see our lantern pod is about to go out of its range of movement, so it's not super useful. What we can do, though, is we can actually designate this target. Maybe. No, it's not going to let me designate the target because it still thinks we're in the previous engagement. But you can actually do quite a lot of work with the lantern pod, and you can redesignate this target that way when you come back around. You don't have to do a whole lot of effort in finding it. If you are set up to use the waypoints correctly on the mission editor, you can actually set it so that you can just track straight to the waypoint, and you can see there that was our previous designated location, and it went into rates mode as soon as we designated off of it. Oh wait, it's going to be down here. Okay, and here's where he went. So that's kind of the lantern stuff. There is an interesting site. Oh, it just lost it because we ran out. You can see here LM, the laser is now masked, and eventually this will actually black out and we'll just be left with the screen. One other interesting aspect to this is you can switch to a black and white mode. This is under the other option, and it is called video export mode. And this will actually record that. You will have to manually record this, my apologies. This will allow you to record it in the black and gray videos, the raw video that the lantern pod actually sees, which is kind of neat in its own right. But you will have to manually record this. It doesn't automatically export it as far as my knowledge. And again, that's going to be in your controls, in the Rio controls. It's under Other. Gotta find it. And then Video Export Toggle. And I have mine bound to left Control V. That brings up this black and white and gray screen. Anyway, I hope you guys have found this video helpful. The lantern pod is a lot of fun to use, especially in multiplayer. I hope to get some good footage sometime of Sko and I lasing for some other people. Maybe it'll be somebody else, I don't know. But I've already done this in multiplayer, and it is a ridiculous amount of fun to be flying in the Rio seat with the lantern pod on and lasing for other aircraft in the area. It is a ridiculous amount of fun for the Rio. The pilot gets probably pretty bored back there, or up there, because of the complete lack of him doing basically anything aside from flying in a circle. But anyway, I'm Whiskey11. Hope this will help you guys out a little bit in trying to utilize the lantern pod and get kind of the gist of it down without having to go through a whole lot of rigmarole. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for watching.